What's up? This is Bexxie, and today I'm going to be doing a track breakdown on my latest track, Baile Vem. I'm going to be showing you how I made this Latin tech house track. So I'm going to be going through everything from the drums to the bass, the vocals, and lots more. So let's dive in. Alright, here's the project. So let me play a little bit of the build going into the first drop so you can hear what it sounds like. Let's start from the top down. So I have this kick, just using a sample from Splice, no processing or anything. Then we have the bass. I have two bass layers. I have this sub bass, and I'm using operators, just creating like a sub sound using a saw wave. Got a filter on it, so it's cutting out a lot of the highs. But then I'm also cutting out a lot of the highs too, with this low pass filter here. Some other processing, I have a compressor, a drum bass for some saturation, not using this for anything, and then LFO tool for side chaining. So one thing I want to talk about is the pattern too. So the pattern versus this top layer bass, and actually let me make this a different color so you can see. With the acid bass versus the sub bass, you can see that the acid bass is actually playing some more like shorter staccato notes, where the sub bass, I wanted to make longer notes. That way it just sounded a lot better to have the sub playing out rather than just following the exact pattern of the acid bass. So yeah, so sometimes when you have like a really staccato sort of bass line like this, it might be better, you know, when you're layering it with your sub to actually have the sub have the notes kind of sustained out a little bit more, and that way you just get a lot more of that low end going. If it's staccato, it might not really come through as well. So that's one thing I wanted to note about the pattern. So with this acid bass, I'm actually using a sample that I found off of Splice. I just really liked the sound of it. So it was this whole pattern, but I just took the one note of it, and it's in F. So I transposed it down to get it to C so that I can play everything in the right notes on the piano roll. And then from there, I'm doing some saturation with Vertigo VSM, some more saturation with Twin Tube, some more saturation with Black Box, then some compression using Shadow Hills compressor, using the bass fingered preset, some EQ, just cutting out the lows so it's not interfering with my sub, and then some side chain to the kick. And then I also have an auto filter that I'm automating throughout. So moving on to the drums, I have a clap, just sample from Splice. I'm using standard clip to clip out the peaks so we don't get a lot of peak volume when it's hitting, especially hitting with the kick. I got a little bit of reverb on it. I have this plate reverb set up here. It's a drum plate, about a 1.2 second decay, which is really nice for drums. The hat, I am using the 909 core kit, just using for the closed hat. And I've created this just 16th note pattern, and I removed some of the notes. And then another thing that I've done too, and I've applied to a lot of the hats and drums here, is some groove using the Swing 16th 59 from the Ableton Groove pool. So that's my hats. I also added this MIDI effect called Add Some Random, which randomizes the amount of velocity. So this random knob here, it kind of controls how much random. I had it around like 17. So that way it's about 17 from the whatever the velocity is of the note. So in this case it's hitting at 100, so it's going to randomize it to a range of 17. So that just gives it a little bit more of a human effect to it, so it doesn't sound as robotic. This also has a bit of reverb as well. This open hat, I am using a sample, and what I've done here is I've put an LFO on the fade out. So this way when the hat hits, It also kind of gives it a human effect, so it's not always hitting at the exact sort of length. So that's a pretty fun little technique that you can use, again, to create some humanization with your drums. And you could just control like the rate and the amount that it's, you know, controlling the fade out. We also have the shaker. I created this shaker pattern just using this shaker sample and added some groove. And that's the shaker and a little bit of reverb. So you can see so far some pretty minimal processing on my drums. Then I've got some fills. This one is just like a little, I think it's like a little break beat. I was thinking about using it as a top loop, but it was a bit too much. So I just kind of use it as a fill that I could use at the end. It sounds like this. Like a little kind of aim break beat sort of thing. And then I have this top loop here I got off of Splice. I'm doing a little bit of compression just to kind of tame any sort of peaks that are coming through. Some EQ. I'm cutting out the lows and a little bit of the high end. We already have a lot going on with like the closed hat, the open hat, the shaker. So I didn't really need this top loop to really fill out that high end frequency. So I just turned it down a little bit using a high shelf. Then we have another couple top loops that we bring in, you know, in and out of the track. So this one, another sample from Splice. So this one I actually applied groove to. The other one I didn't. Sometimes with groove, it can be a little bit tricky, but I did try to add the groove to it, but to me it sounded like it actually kind of didn't work really well with this top loop. Sometimes I kind of have to like do it by ear and just see if it works or not. But this one, what I did was I put it all on the grid. You can see that because I have these transient markers here. So I put it back on the grid and then I applied my groove to it, and then it fit well within like the groove of the track. And then I'm just doing a little EQ for this as well. So a little same with the other one, cutting out the lows, cutting out a bit from the high end. And then I've got this ride loop that comes in and out. So same thing, I applied the groove. I'm also doing the warping in beats mode, and then I chose transient and this little right arrow, and I turned down the amount. That way it actually changes the ride. So it would be like this. So it's like a little bit of noise between hits, right? So turning it down, it kind of shortens everything, just makes it a little bit tighter and punchier, which is what we're going for with these drums. And then I have a few little fills that I'm, you know, just using throughout. So this one, and then a crash, which I'm using the 909 core kit, and then a snare roll, which is just a snare sample, and I'm automating the auto filter and volume. So those are the drums. So just all together, this is what the percussion group sounds like. Oh, and then I'm also doing some group processing on the drums. So I've got this black box doing a little bit of saturation to the drums. I've turned the mix down quite a bit. I really just wanted it to be, you know, just a subtle amount of saturation. And then I'm using a bus compressor, which is the same as like glue compressor in Ableton, just to kind of glue everything together. And then I'm using Ozone Imager. I'm using it I was just checking the stereo field of the drums. So if we play this and kind of see, like, I want some stuff down the middle, like the clap, right? And then I still have some stuff out to the sides, like the hats, the tops, things like that. So I like to check the stereo field and just make sure we have, you know, everything that we need going on there. Like nothing's too narrow or it's not too wide. And then an auto filter to, you know, do some automation filtering. I just have some strings that come in and out, just like a high tension string. It's just playing the note of the key it's in, of F minor, just a nice little way to add some like tension throughout. And then the vocals. So this vocal I got off of Splice, and you could see I also applied the groove to it just to have it fit, because it was like this looping vocal. So I wanted the loop to also fit the groove of the rest of the track. So for this vocal, Let me show you what I'm doing for processing. So a bit of saturation with black box. I also have this Lindell TE100 EQ, and I'm using the Screaming Guitars preset. Then I'm using the Noveltech Vocal Enhancer just to add a little bit of character to the vocal. And I've got a bit of phaser, a bit of this doubler, and then some EQ, cutting out the lows, and then another vocal doubler, a little bit more width, side chaining to the kick, some auto filter that's just being automated, and then ozone imager to add some more width. Then we've also got this reverb here, so this hall verb we're using. This one's a longer hall, so it's 4 seconds. And then some delay. So this is a dotted eighth note delay that I'm using. So that's that vocal. And then we have this other kind of like accent vocal that comes in. So playing them together, you'll hear. For this accent vocal, I'm doing a lot of the same processing. However, what I'm also doing is panning it. So you'll notice it kind of like pans left and then right. That way it's not really, competing with the main vocal. It's just kind of like a background singer essentially. And then I've also got some reverb on it, but no delay. And then for some effects, we've got risers, white noise. I've got this little like woo sound. I've got this other vocal. These are all just like little touches that come in and out. A little breath sound. And then I also have my own white noise here that I made. Sometimes I like to use, some white noise samples, but then sometimes if I want to make a specific pattern, I'll do my own white noise. In Serum, you can just use the noise oscillator, and there's a bunch of them. I use the air can, and it creates this sound here. All right, so it's side chaining too to the kick. I think the side chain's on the group. Yeah, and that is the track breakdown. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and drop a comment below if you have any questions or have any feedback on any other videos you'd like to see in the future. And I'll see you in the next one.